Welcome back to the GCSE Maths Pro YouTube channel. Today's video is the second part of the ratio topic, where instead of being given the total and then needing to share that out, we will be given either one value, so one side of the ratio when we want to work out the other side, or we might be given the difference between the two ratio parts, and we need to work out the quantities that each person gets. If you haven't already checked out the first video, which is on just simplifying ratios and sharing out ratios in a more straightforward way, definitely check that one out first. Otherwise, let's just get straight into it. So Jan and Holly share some money in a ratio of 3:7. So first of all, I like to put the initials just so I can visualize it here. You're going to write them in the same order that they are written in the question. So Jan is first, therefore she will be with 3 parts, and Holly is second, so she will be the 7 parts. We're then told that Holly gets £42. We need to work out the amount of money that Jan gets. So as you can see, we haven't actually been given a total for what both of them are going to be sharing. We've only been given one side. So I tend to like to rewrite it. So Jan to Holly is 3:7. And then I go below, so I like to do it vertically so I can compare the sides. And I write down the information I've got. So Holly gets 42, so I'm literally going to write 42 on Holly's side. Now I can compare them. Do you see how I've got 2 numbers on Holly's side? So I could work out, okay, well, how have we gone from 7 to 42? i.e., let's divide that. Gives us 6. So it's 6 times bigger, isn't it? Therefore, whatever I do on one side, I'm going to do the same on the other. So to find Jan's amount of money, I need to times her 3 parts by 6 as well, which is 18. So how much does Jan get? Well, she gets 18. If they ask you how much is the total, obviously then you can add those two together, which would be £60. But in this case, we just want to know one side. So I'm going to first of all basically divide the actual quantity that I've been given by that same person's number of parts in the ratio. So in other words, we could say that that's basically £6 per part, isn't it? £6 per part. If you've seen the previous video, then you'll see how that relates. £6 per part. So if Jan has 3 parts, I just need to times 3 by 6. And that is literally it. If you've got one side, that's all we need to do. So let's try another one. We've got Alex, Rosie and Isaac share some counters in the ratio 4:3:9. Alex gets 144 counters. Work out the amount of counters that Isaac gets. So exactly the same thing. The only thing now is we do have a 3-part ratio. So I'm going to write down the initials in the same order that they are written in the sentence. And then obviously copy the same ratio. Now we've been told Alex. So Alex has 144. So I'm going to write that there. Now we want to know Isaac. So in this question particularly, Rosie isn't really that relevant, is she? We're just looking at this side where we've got both numbers. So how do I go from 4 to 144? So well, let's just divide that to work it out. That is 36. So in this case, that's basically 36 counters per part of the ratio, isn't it? So we've obviously multiplied by 36. Now they've asked for Isaac. So let's just look at Isaac's side. He has 9 parts, which we also need to times by 36. So 9 times 36 gives us 324 counters. Okay, so 3, 2, 4. That's how many Isaac gets. We don't need to use Rosie. We don't need to work out Rosie. If you wanted to, that would obviously be 3 times 36, which is 108 if you wanted to know that. But that is literally it. So if you've got a 3-part ratio, it doesn't make any difference. Just make sure you're obviously working with the correct people in the question. So Kevin and Joshua share out some cards in the ratio 8:5. So that's obviously Kevin and then Joshua. Kevin gets 40 cards. Work out the total amount of cards. Okay, so this time we've not been asked one of the two sides. So for example, we've been given Kevin, we've not been asked for Joshua. Specifically, we've been just asked for the total of all the cards. So let's lay it out the same way. Kevin and Joshua, we've got 8:5. We've been told Kevin, so that's the 40 on the left. We don't know Joshua. So we've got 2 options here. Either we could work out, obviously, Joshua as we did in the previous questions and then add the 2 together. Or the other way is that we say, again, similar bit at the start. How do I go from 8 to 40? So that's obviously timesing by 5, isn't it? And then if I just add together the number of parts of the ratio, because that would account for all the cards, wouldn't it? 8 plus 5 is 13. Then all I need to do to find the total is 13 times by the 5, because it's 5 cards per part of the ratio, isn't it? And for all of them, there's 13 parts. That gives me 65 cards. Okay, that's what I would do. As I said, you could do it as you did before and work out that Joshua would obviously get 25 cards because 5 times 5 is 25. Add them together, you get 65. Literally your choice, whichever you prefer of those two methods, but you should get 65 as your answer. Okay, so now we're on to the ones where we've got a difference. Georgia and Alma share some sweets in a ratio of 8 to 7. So that's obviously G, and that's A. Georgia gets 5 more sweets than Alma. So you can see how we've been given a difference now. We don't know how many Georgia gets, we don't know how many Alma gets, but we've been given the difference between the two of them. Work out the amount that Alma gets. So in this case, let's copy it down here. Georgia to Alma is 8 to 7. Because we're working with the difference, I want to equate the 5 sweets to a number of parts. So you literally work out the difference between the number of parts. In this case, clearly you can see the difference is one part, isn't it? So that 1 part is equal to the 5 sweets, isn't it? Georgia gets 5 more sweets. So given that 1 part is 5 sweets, well, we want to know Alma, who has got 7 parts, how many sweets would be for 7 parts? Well, that's literally just times in by 7, isn't it, on both sides? So 5 times 7 is 35 sweets. Okay, so that's how many Alma gets. Technically, Georgia would get, obviously, 5 times 8, which is 40 sweets. So you can see, you can double check, do I have that difference of 5? Yeah, we do. Okay, so that's what we do if we've been given a difference between them. You literally compare the difference in the ratio numbers with the difference in this case, sweets. Okay, so Eric and Aoife share out the rent in the ratio 3 to 5, so that's E and A. Aoife pays £340 more than Eric, so again, we've got a difference. First of all, for part A, we need to work out the amount that Eric pays in terms of rent. So we're going to do exactly the same thing. Let's have a look at it over here. We've got 3 to 5 for Eric and Aoife. So if the difference is £340, what's the difference in the number of parts? Well, obviously 5 minus 3 is 2. So there's a 2-part difference. So 2 parts in this case is the same as £340. Okay, so it's not 1 part anymore, it's 2 parts in this case. So therefore, I actually probably want to know what 1 part is, don't I? To then be able to apply it here because I've got odd numbers. So 1 part would obviously be dividing by 2 on both sides, wouldn't it? So that would be £170. So if 1 part is 170, we want to know how much Eric gets. He has obviously 3 parts. So I'm going to take that 170 and I'm going to times it by 3, which is £510. So you can see I've times that by 3. So that one had an extra step because of the fact that we weren't given a difference of 1 part, we were given a difference of 2 parts. So we had to work out 1 part and then back up to 3. So Eric pays £510. Now part B is then work out how much the rent costs. So that's like in general, they're both sharing this rent, aren't they? Eric pays £510. How much does the rent cost in general? Well, we already know how much Eric pays, so you could take obviously your 1 part, which is 170, times it by 5. That would probably be the easiest in this particular question. If, let's say that was the only question, you hadn't already worked out what Eric has paid, let's work it out from there. You would obviously have to do the exact same thing, work out, in that case, 2 parts, therefore 1 part is 170, and then in total, for all of the rent, do you see how there's 8 parts? So let's say if we didn't know how much Eric already had, we can do 8 times 170 to get all of them. So that is £1,360 for the total rent. Or if you do it the other way, we can work out Aoife's amount is 5 parts times 170, which is £850. But obviously then you'd have to remember to add that to Eric. So the total would be £850 plus £510, which should give you the same thing. 1,360. So do you see how you've got those 2 options? It depends, well, A, which you prefer, but also maybe if you've already done a part A, you could use that information. If you haven't already done that part A, you would have to go straight into using your 170 times it by the total parts in the whole of your ratio. Okay, so our last question we've got here. The ingredients to make bread include flour, water, and salt in the ratio 50 to 30 to 1. So we've got flour, water, and salt. There is 174 grams more water than salt. Work out how much is needed of each ingredient. So we don't know any of the ingredients, we've just been given yet again another difference. So we've also got a 3-part ratio here. So let's rewrite our ratio so we can see it. 50 to 30 to 1. The difference is between water and salt, so these two here. So what is that difference in terms of the number of parts? That's obviously 29, isn't it? 29 parts is the same as 174 grams. So again, I need to know what 1 part is ideally. I would have to go, how do I go from 29 to 1, or any number to 1? We just divide by itself, isn't it? Divide by 29. And obviously, therefore, do that on both sides. So 174 divided by 29 gives me 6. Okay, so that's 6 grams of salt, because luckily the salt is already 1 part, isn't it? So let's write that over here. We've got salt. That is just 6 grams, isn't it? The water is 30 parts. So either you take salt, you take the 6 grams and times it by 30, or technically we could just add both of those, couldn't we? It's completely up to you which you prefer. Just to be consistent, I'm going to do the multiplication version. So to find 30 parts, I need to do 6 times 30, which gives me 180 grams. That's water. And then the flour is 50 parts. So 50 parts, let's go back to using our 1 part, which is 6, times 50 is 300 grams. And there we go. So work out how much is needed of each ingredient. We've got it here. We've got salt is 6 grams, water is 180 grams, and flour is 300 grams. Okay, so if you've got a 3-part ratio, it works effectively in the same way, because really they're just going to get you to compare the difference between 2 parts of that 3-part ratio. It's going to make no difference otherwise. So thanks for watching that video on the second part of ratio. If you do want to go back and check out how we just share out ratios in a much more easy way when we've been given the total, and also if you want to see how to simplify ratios, go back and check out that first video. It will be linked down below if you need to have a look at it. Otherwise, if you found this video helpful, make sure to like and subscribe, and leave down below any questions or comments that you might have.